Hey everyone, it's Shaylin. I'm here today with another writing video, and today I have a confession to make. It might be a bit controversial. I love second person. Now, second person is something we don't really talk about very much, so today I wanted to make a video talking about second person and why it's great, and why I love it, because I have found a recent new love for the second person. There's a lot of misconceptions about second person, about when you should use it, about how you should use it, and I wanted to just talk to you about why it's actually great. Second person, the forgotten person. Second person is like the weird cousin that you forget you're related to, and it's just so weird, but you invite them to family reunions anyways, and you consider them part of the family, but are they really part of the family? Yeah, nobody likes second person who's a novelist. But recently I've been doing short fiction stuff, and I've found a newfound love for the second person. And I think it's just very easily dismissed. It's commonly dismissed as something too weird to use, when really it has a lot of great uses, but you have to use it smart. First of all, I'll say you're not really gonna see it in novels, at least not an entire novel. An entire novel in second person would be hard. It's better with shorter pieces, short stories. You can do a lot of really great things in short fiction with the second person. And so while I'm talking about this, keep in mind that I'm really talking about a short fiction scale at the moment, but I don't want to say that you can't try to use it in other ways. So first of all, what is the second person? Something that is commonly labeled as second person that is not second person is when a first person narrator addresses the reader as you. That is not second person, that is first person. It's just a first person who's a bit more aware of the audience. And a story becomes second person when the protagonist is addressed as you, not the audience. Now, the biggest misconception about second person is that it is meant to imply that you, as the reader, are the protagonist. There are cases of that. You see that more in thriller type stories that are supposed to be more intense because you're the protagonist, but because I know that that's why a lot of people are off put by second person, because they think, well, if I'm writing things that are happening or that the main character is doing, but the reader would never do that, they're going to be really off put. That's not really a correct interpretation of what second person can be. We can use second person in a much more literary way. The second person mode that I want to talk about is known as second person interior or second person intimate. It's not supposed to say that the reader is the protagonist. So what can using a second person intimate point of view imply about the story? First of all, it can imply that the events are so personal or so difficult to think about that the protagonist can only admit it to themselves. It is maybe so difficult to think about that they can't even use the word I. The protagonist is talking to themselves or to a former version of themselves. It can imply that the main character is needing to instruct themselves how to act if you're using present. This is sometimes known as second person instructional. Yeah, it's basically implying that the main character is maybe so out of their element that they need to be instructing themselves. And it can also imply that your main character is in some sort of dissociated state. It's like the memories of the story or the events of the story might be so painful, so personal, that the main character needs to distance themselves from it a bit. They can't even recall it with themselves in the situation. They can't recall it to an audience. It gives the feeling that they're telling the story to themselves in their own mind. It's all very literary and deep. With second person, you can actually still have very deep characterization. You can still name your character. A lot of second person stories don't, but you can name your character. You can still get a strong feel for your character's thoughts and personality. One thing to keep in mind when you're writing second person, and I think this is really important and not intuitive, is to make sure you don't get caught up in the lyricism of the you. So what's meant by this is when we write in first person or third person, it is good to try to, avoid the overuse of I, avoid the overuse of he or she, but those aren't pretty words. I, he, she, they, they're not pretty words. They don't sound nice, so it's easy to avoid them. But you has a very lovely sound, so it's very easy to get caught up in that and write this very repetitive, and you did this and you did that and you and you and you and you, and just overuse the word you when you actually want to avoid that. I'm gonna read a short example of this from my own work. I'm currently writing a story in second person, and I'm just gonna read it to you the way it is and then the way it would be if I hadn't cut all the yous. And you'll see here that there are no, I've cut the pronouns out of a lot of these sentences. I do use the word you a few times, but for the most part I've tried to cut it. Notice that in quite a few of the sentences it does have that instructional feel because I've cut the pronoun. You don't have to say you walked across the room. You can literally just say walk across the room. So here's an example. This is unedited, by the way. This is a first draft. Wake up dazed, 7:26 p.m. Sunlight orange now. Walk past the common room, break mid-step. Eavesdrop. Cut off their conversation by turning into the dining hall. Sit at a table you wiped clean 12 hours ago while the kettle boils and leaf through the jar of tea. Chamomile never tastes like anything. Your sense of time is already flipped backwards, no need to add caffeine. Earl Grey is out. Settle for hibiscus, steep it until it's the shade of wine. So obviously this is not what normal prose often sounds like. I've cut a lot of the pronouns and a lot of the to be verbs. It could have sounded like this. You wake up dazed. It's 7:26 p.m. Sunlight orange now. You walk past the common room and break mid-step. You eavesdrop. You cut off their conversation by turning into the dining hall. Then sit at a table you wiped clean 12 hours ago while the kettle boils and leaf through the jar of tea. Chamomile never tastes like anything. Your sense of time is already flipped backwards, no need to add caffeine. Earl Grey is out. You settle for hibiscus. You steep it until it's the shade of wine. You see how much stronger it is with all those words cut? And yes, it's not normal. It's not what you're used to, and it sounds very literary. You don't see this kind of thing in fiction other than literary fiction, but if you're trying to use second person in a literary way, cut the you. You don't need it. The fact that it sounds like an order is enough to keep the second person going. And second person also, like, you can have great second person stories where the focus is actually on another character, and you can get a very observational feel, similar to an observational first person, where like your first person is a witness to the story. You can get a similar feel to that in second person, where the second person is an observer and maybe the other characters are actually the main characters. Not what I was going for in that story, but it is possible. In the description, I'm going to leave a link to a fantastic second person story, one of my favorite. It's called Mountain Under the Sea by D.W. Wilson. It's not very long. It's probably like 1,500 words. It won the CBC prize. It is freaking fantastic. Read it. Love it. It's great. I read it for class and I was like, this is so brilliant. The author came to talk to our class and I was just like, thank you. He gave us that avoid the lyricism of the you tip. Great tip. Anyways, guys, that is it for today's video on second person. I hope I've opened your mind to a new world that you can try. I know that it can seem very alienating, it can seem really weird, but it can be really interesting to try. It can speak a lot to the character, and point of view is just a great thing. Like, point of view is a great tool, and I think it's great to not just rule out a tool automatically because it's uncommon. And there are some awesome ways that you can use the second person. Haven't seen it much in novels, but the world is your oyster. Once you write one thing in second person, you're going to want to write everything in second person. Now that I've done it once, I'm just like, can I use second person for every story? But like, I can't. It's not relevant to every story. Like, you use it when it's relevant. I am a fan. I have been converted to the second person side, and like, I'm a fan. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can send me an ask on Tumblr, and I will see you in another video. Bye.